Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well and welcome to this session where we'll be talking about econometrics today. So let's start with the very basic and try to understand what econometrics is. And usually people fear this subject, especially the people from economics background. Let's try to see if that fear is really worth it. So let's begin. So the first question that might come here in your mind is, what is econometrics? So if I have to break this up into two parts, it's basically a combination of economics and matrix. So econometrics is about economic measurement. Measurement. Okay. So let's. So this is the a lingual breakup of the term, and that's how you can. That's one way to see what econometrics is actually about. The second way to understand this, that is a much more better way to understand what econometrics is. So it is basically the application of statistics or statistical methods in economics. So it is the application of statistics in economics. Okay. So why do we have to do this application? Why do we have to apply statistics in economics? Because uh, basically we study economics, like our basic understanding of economics is the theoretical understanding of economics. But there is also a parallel real world where things are actually happening. So we study theories, but those theories are also being tested somewhere in the real world. So in order to test the validity of those theories or whatever relations that we have learned in the economic books or whatever theoretical understanding that we have. So in order to test those theories, we need something. Okay. So econometrics is a tool through which we can test those theories with the help of statistics. So we have theories, we have a real world where things are actually happening and a lot of data is being generated, and that data is used to test those theories that we deal throughout our undergraduate or in a lot of economic books. Okay, so econometrics is that tool that helps you test those relationships and theories, and not just these are theories or relationship. You can also test the relevance of a government policy. So whatever, suppose a government makes a policy of supposingly giving pensions to the old age people. So we can test the impact of this pension on the living standards of the older people. Okay, so whatever data is being generated, we can collect that data and try to test the performance of that policy through various statistical tools. So this entire process of testing of economic theory or a government policy through statistics and the data that is being generated is called your econometrics. Okay, so it is the testing of relationships. So it so these relationships don't really have to be economic relationships. You can test a lot of other relationship between different variables. So through the help of statistics. But since we are dealing with economics here, so our emphasis is on economic relationships, and that is why the term econometrics, because we are studying economic relationships through the help of statistics, and that is why it's called econometrics. Okay, the testing of economic relationships and theories, okay, or government intervention. So supposingly the RBI changes the interest rates in the market. Okay, so the RBI has reduced the interest rate in the market. So through economic theories, we know that when interest rates fall, your inflation goes up. So when the interest rates are actually decreased in the market, so is the inflation level actually going up? Okay, so that is something of our interest. So we can collect data on inflation over a period of time and actually test this theory or this concept that we have read in our books, that whether inflation and your interest rate are inversely related. So that is through econometrics that we can do. Okay, another example of a relationship that can be tested through econometrics is maybe the amount of schooling affecting your level of wages in the future. Okay, so is the amount of schooling or the years of schooling affecting your wage in the future? So we'll have to collect data of a lot of people who are working in the market. Okay, so we'll have to collect data on how many years of schooling did they achieve, and what is their wage at present. So we can try to establish a relationship here, that whether your s- years of schooling affect your level of wage or not. So these sort of relationships are tested with the help of statistical methods and the data that is generated over a period of time. So this is basically the use of econometrics for us. So your data, sorry, so your data is generated in two forms. So we have experimental data, and we have non-experimental slash observational or retrospective retrospective data. So these are the two ways through which data can be captured. So in the context of economics, we don't have experimental data because it is more relevant to scientific fields, like in chemistry labs or physics labs. So in there, experimental data is being generated because they conduct experiment, and based on those experiments they capture data. So for the purpose of economics, we majorly focus on non-experimental or observational data that is retrospective. So when a policy is actually launched, so we cannot test the impact of that policy immediately. We'll have to wait for a period of time to data to be generated, and with the help of that data we can actually test the policy uh, effectiveness. So that is why it is also called retrospective data, right? So these are the ways through which we gather data. So, so let's move ahead. So econometrics allows empirical analysis of economic theories economic by using economic data and statistical tools. So we have this information now, that econometrics allows us to analyze economic theories with the help of economic data and economic tools. So a term that I use here is empirical analysis. So econometrics help us in empirical analysis. So what is the meaning of empirical analysis? So it basically means that an analysis that uses data data, okay, to test a theory, to test a theory, or to establish a relationship. So data is really important when it comes to econometrics. So the entire idea of econometrics is based on data. So if there is no data, it's really hard to use econometrics to uh, do any sort of thing. So empirical analysis, so a use of econometrics is in itself an empirical analysis, because you use data, and through data theories are tested and relationships between different variables are established. Okay, so econometrics is all about your empirical analysis. So how do we do an empirical analysis? Let's talk more about this thing. Okay, so okay, let's move ahead. How do we do successful empirical analysis, right? So basically there are three steps. There are three steps. Okay, so let's start with first step. So the first step is to pose a question. Pose a question. So whatever relationship that you want to establish, it has to come up in a form of question. So suppose I want to establish this relationship, uh, or check the relationship between years of schooling and wage rate. So I'll come up with this question, that whether whether the amount of schooling, the amount of schooling affects your wage rate. So this is the question. Uh, okay, so that is the step number one. So when you have a question to deal with, you'll move to your step number two. Let's see what step two is. Step two. So you will now create a model or economic model. Okay. S- So model is basically a mathematical relationship between the variables that you are trying to relate. Okay, in our case we have schooling schooling and wage rate so the second step is basically, it's an important step, because you create a model, and through this model only will move towards a last step, that is the actual econometric framework that is used to test the relevance of the questions that we have asked. Okay, so this modeling part is important because the model that you create will actually lead to the result that you get in the end. Why? Because if and this model is totally dependent on the way the econometric. So the model creation is totally a subjective tool uh, that the person who's creating the model uses. Okay, so it is totally based on the intuitive understanding of that person. So if the person thinks that, or he feels that the schooling affects the wage rate, so he will create a model in that way. And if the person thinks that vice versa is true, the wage rate, which is very unlikely although, but if he thinks that the wage rate affects the number of years of schooling, then he can create a different model. So this the modeling part is totally dependent on the intuitive sense of the person who's creating the model. So when we have posed a question, when we have also created a model, so in this case we can say that your wage rate is a function of years of schooling. So this is your economic model. Okay, so what is unknown here is, so we we know that there is a relationship, or we feel that there is the relationship that exists between wage rate and the years of schooling. But what is the intensity, or what is the sort of relationship, we are not aware of that. So we are not knowing this function. Okay, this function. So this is something that is unknown to us. So how do we reach to the level where we know what is this functional relationship between the two? So in that is where econometric model or econometrics come to help. So then we have the step number 3, that is turning the economic model into econometric model. Okay, why? Because our economic model, or the model that we had created earlier, has certain limitations. The limitations, like, we don't know what the function is. We Although we know that there is a relationship there, or there might be a relationship between these two things, or these two things, as in, although we know that the wage rate is affected by the years of schooling, but that is not the only thing that is affecting your wage rate. Okay, so there might be other variables that might be affecting your wage rate. So how do we balance them in order to establish our relationship? Okay, how do we deal with those things? So all these things, all these limitations are overcome by creating an econometric model. Okay, so in here I can write that your wage rate is equal to beta naught plus beta 1 sc- schooling plus beta 2 training plus beta 3 experience plus new. Okay, so I can see that your wage rate is dependent on a number of variables, but what I'm really interested, as per my econometric question or the question that I had posed, is on beta 1. Okay, so your beta 1 is a parameter that will that will tell us about tell us about the kind of relationship, kind or strength or significance of the relationship between your wage of your years of schooling and your wage rate. So beta naught, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3 are different parameters, and this is what we need to estimate, and this is where econometrics will help us. So we create this model with the help of a question and an economic model, and through this econometric model we try to estimate the relationship between different variables. Okay, new, or you can say u is equal to your error term error term sorry error term. Okay, so it basically inculcates all the other variables that might not become the part of your model. Okay, so whatever other things or other variables that are not in the model that affect your relationship, okay, or the affect your wage rate here, are being captured through the value u. Okay, so u is never zero. Okay, the u is never equal to zero, because there will always be some sort of variable that will be beyond your model to capture, and that might be affecting the relationship that you are trying to infer. So in our case, maybe the level of intelligence of a person that he is born with is something that we have not brought in our model, but that will always affect the amount of wage that a person is getting. Okay, so all these terms or all these things are being captured by your error term, that is new. Okay, so this was about the very basic brief idea about what econometrics is and how it helps us in making our economic theories more relevant by testing them, and how it helps us in creating models which can be used to test any sort of relationships that might exist or that might not exist. Okay, so both the things are true. So this is all for this uh, video. So we'll move ahead with the further things in the next video. Thank you.